This is Gary Mathis. Today I'm going to go ahead and start part 5 of building a PHP MVC framework. So what I went ahead and did is I migrated the PHP Steroid project over to iNet Portal. It's running, it works great. That's the only difference between the project compared to where we left off. I just switched servers. Matter of fact, the Apache configuration should almost be exactly the same. There's no difference, mod rewrite, and things like that. This configuration does not use mod rewrite, but it uses a great alternative, and the reason being is iNet Portal deploys websites kind of on the fly like that without ever having to restart Apache or reload any kind of configuration files. So the only difference is it's not using mod rewrite, and my configuration for the project is actually within the Apache configuration file itself instead of .htaccess files. iNet Portal doesn't read htaccess files, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue keeping my .htaccess file where it is. You can go ahead and ignore it. Because I will not have to edit the .htaccess file ever in this. If you come up with any kind of issues or anything like that, where different file extensions don't work and stuff like that, go ahead and revert to I think it's my first video where I showed you how to set up mod rewrite things in .htaccess. So basically, my Apache configuration does not use .htaccess. Instead, it's actually globally configured for every website, and is based off the WordPress configuration because WordPress is kind of it's different. Put it that way. So WordPress doesn't play well with my configuration, but PHP Steroid plays very well with the WordPress configuration. So the WordPress.htaccess is actually in my http.conf. But that's the only difference between where we stood in video 4 versus now. We're running the same version of PHP. We're keeping everything within a quote-unquote local file system. As far as the server is concerned, it's within a local file system, but it's really not. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on coding. First thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I got a lot of comments on, I think it was my third video, of what I should do next. I'm not going to go that route just yet, not in this video. Next video, more than likely. I was actually driving home from work, and I was trying to think about what to do on this video, and it kind of dawned on me. We do not have a URL class. We don't have a class to build our URLs for us. We don't have a class to read all the parameters of the URLs or any kind of post parameters or anything like that. So today, that's what we're going to actually build. We're going to build a static class within the core to read URL parameters and stuff like that. We'll probably actually get started on our common class. Basically, it's a global class that you can modify, add all the components that you want. That doesn't actually ship with PHP Steroids. Basically, all the custom components that you want to add to the framework will actually be added to the common class, or you can just create a another class somewhere else in the framework, and it should all work. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on coding. We're in the PHP Steroid folder here inside of NetBeans, and inside of my core folder, I want to go into the classes folder, and inside the classes folder, I want to create a new file, and I want to call this URL. So once it goes ahead and creates that, it's going to go ahead and open. And what I'm just going to do is open up in PHP, and I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to call it URL. Inside of this URL class, I'm going to create a static function, and I'm going to say part. This function is going to take one parameter, and that's going to be number. So basically what this class should do is it should say parts equals explode, and we're going to split this up by the forward slash, and we're going to grab the server request URI. Inside of this, we're going to say if, or we'll just use an itinerary statement, and we'll say return question mark that, and we'll say is set parts number. Then if that checks out to equal true, we're just going to return parts number. If not, we're going to return false. And that's all there is to that function. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create another function called static post. And this is going to be a function, static function post. And we're going to give that a key as a parameter. Now we're going to say if, or actually we're going to say return, and we'll use the itinerary statement again, is set post key, and we'll return that or false. We'll create a static function called get, and we'll go ahead and pass down the key. What this is going to do is we'll return this is set, right? But we'll do a URL decode on that parameter. And these two post variables are going to return the get. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to create another static function, and it's going to be called request, or we'll actually call this param. Actually, we'll just call this request. And we'll get the key, and we'll return, well, we're not going to return quite yet. We'll say if is set get key, else if, and else. Or we can actually say if URL get key, return URL get key, else if, and we'll do an else, and inside the else statement we'll return false, and we'll say URL post. If URL post key, excuse me about that, we'll return URL post key. And the beauty behind this function is it does more, so it's more resource intensive, not very much more resource intensive, but it basically automatically calls these for you. So it's just a quick way of doing things. Next thing we'll do is we'll say static build, and we'll call this a function, static function build, and we'll say URL params. Inside of this, we're going to say if URL or str position, or so we'll do string position, we'll search our haystack, which is our URL, and we'll look for forward slash, if I can type today, and we'll say equals to false. We'll say else, well, we don't need an else statement there, or yes we do, and we'll say prefix is equal to forward slash, and then else prefix is equal to nothing. And inside of our index.php file, we should have our domain. So globals config domain. We'll probably do an if statement here. We'll say if and our haystack is URL. Our needle is going to be, actually this wouldn't work, so ignore that. So basically what we're doing is if it doesn't have the forward slash, we want to go ahead and append that to our prefix. So domain, if it does have the forward slash, then the prefix is going to be nothing. So now what we'll do is we'll say params equals implode, and our glue is going to be the ampersand, and we'll say pieces, but this would in all actuality work, but the issue with it is we're not doing a URL encode on these params. So what we'll do is we'll do a for each, and we'll create append equals to nothing. So we'll do a for each params as param, or as key is equal to params, and we'll say append dot equals, and we'll have an itinerary statement. Append equals nothing, and if it equals nothing, we'll put a question mark. If not, ampersand. So now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and use append dot equals URL encode key, and then we'll append this together, use an equal sign, and use URL encode again for the param variable. So now what we should do is we should return, and we need to say equals array here by default. So what we do is we return prefix dot append. So now what would happen is if I called this function, said URL build, and I put in my route here, so login, and said params is equal to an array, last page is equal to / dashboard. What it will do is it will create an array, not an array, it'll create a URL to / login. It will give these parameters, and it will do the URL encoding for you. So that's pretty simple. And what we'll do now is we'll say static function URL. Actually, that probably wouldn't work. So static function let's see, build. Another word for build would be, or we'll just say simple. The idea behind this is we want to call the simple function, which will only take a URL by default, which makes it very easy. And we will just grab this, and we will return that. So that's our URL class at the moment. So basically what it does is it can get the different parts of the URL, such as, oh, one more thing I forgot to do is explode. By question mark here, because we don't want to read the question marks inside of here. And the best way to do that is like that. So basically what we're doing is we're taking the request URI, which actually returns all of our parameters. We don't want to deal with the parameters within this. So what we do is we go ahead and explode by question mark, which turns the array, turns the string into an array by the question mark, and then it starts out with parts equals URI 1, which is the first part of the array before the question mark. So that was just a quick fix in this class. The next thing we want to go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and create our common class, which will contain a bunch of common functions that you'll use throughout your framework, but you don't necessarily have to create a class for. So we'll create a class, common, and it won't extend anything. And pretty much at this point, that's the only thing that's going to be in the common class. It's just defining the class. So the whole goal behind this class is if I'm inside of a controller or something like that, and maybe I need to get a profile photo, so I have a static function profile photo, and it'll take a profile ID. So the whole goal here is, since this is only specific to your project, you would actually build this function into the project. That way you can actually load profile photos on the fly without having to build all the components in every controller, or actually have to create a class just to get profile photos. So the whole goal behind this framework is to make things a lot more simple without having to repeat yourself over and over and over. So that's the whole goal behind this common class. So common functions that you would have to call within your framework or within your application. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Like and share and subscribe this video. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.